Good morning, viewers. David Oliverio, the Preaching Humanist here. So today's going to be a little different episode. I want to just kind of sit back and talk. And this may be a little bit longer than most of the episodes I do. As you can see, I'm still at home in our little cozy apartment in South Austin using my iPhone. So I do want to discuss racism since the incident with George Floyd, and how I have great disdain for all social and economic inequalities. So I'm going to talk to you about a old white guy's perspective on racism. Myself, I will be turning 63 years old next month in July of 2020. I do want to promote this worldview of humanism in this topic today. Before we get into my story and all the experiences that I have seen since the 1950s in Detroit, Michigan, Waco, Texas, and here in Austin, all the way up through the present. Those of you that are younger, those of you that are in your 20s and 30s, didn't live in that era. I'm going to tell you what happened back in the 50s and 60s and even 70s in my high school days and up till now. Is it getting better or is it getting worse? I'm an optimist, but I want you to hear this, and I hope I do not offend. I stand corrected if I make mistakes. I've already talked to some of my black friends who are humanists and atheists to make sure I'm not getting off here. And I want to make sure I do this in a dignified, clarified way for people to comprehend and see this point. First of all, I think secular humanism, of all the worldviews and philosophies out there currently, is the best that we have of working against inequalities and for all kinds of social justice. And that includes, obviously, ending racism. It's not perfect, but it's better. Humanism, as I say often, promotes the worth, dignity, value, freedom, equality, well-being of all people. White people, black people, brown people, Asian, straight, gay, rich, poor, educated, uneducated. Humanism is a human-centered life stance and worldview. That's why I say there's nothing better, the most advanced system we have for freedom for all is humanism. Why? Because humanity, the word human, has replaced God. All humans. So we value all human lives. I do plead ignorance in this matter of racism. As an older white guy, I am not an expert. I don't claim to be an expert, but I do claim to have some experience in this matter. Now, my experiences of racism began back in the 1950s. I was born in 1957 in Detroit, Michigan. Now, even before that, let me tell you some of my experiences with my family. Both of my parents and their parents, my grandparents, all came from mainland Italy, southern Italy. And I will show you and talk to you about racism even within the races and discrimination. So my mother was born in 1931. Well, actually, my parents both were born in 1931. They immigrated to New York City in the 20s and 30s, like many European immigrants. And I've heard stories from my mother, and she's told me what it was like to be in New York City, living in the Italian neighborhood. In New York City, my grandparents used to tell me about this. There was the Italian neighborhood, blacks, Jews, Irish, Catholic, Protestant, Puerto Rican. They were segregated. This is primitive thinking. Humanism advances past this. Tribalism and this way of thinking. And my mother told me that her mother, my grandmother, told her when she was about 12 years old to never date boys from the next neighborhood, the Irish neighborhood. An Italian girl could not be interested in an Irish boy. Those are the others. Now, we know it gets even worse with the white and black situation. Now, my parents, my mother remained in New York City. My father, as he was raised in Detroit. My mother's church in New York City as a child was a Pentecostal, all-Italian church. Now, here you have already segregation and discrimination against others, even within the white race. Now, we moved to Detroit, Michigan. I was born there in 1957. And I remember when we moved to the suburbs, probably in the mid to late 60s, when I was in elementary school. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories about racism in America, in my experience. My little sister and I were left alone for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. My mother left to go to a neighbor's home to get some milk or butter or eggs. My little sister invited her new friend, who was black, in an all-white suburban Detroit neighborhood. I had never seen and experienced racism as a little child. I didn't care if somebody was black or white. I'd never really been around black or brown people because I lived in an all-white neighborhood, right? And we had a girl who was my little sister's friend come over. They were probably 7. I was about 9 or 10. I don't remember. And all I can remember is her, this little girl. Actually, she was a mulatto, what we used to call back in the day. Mixed. I think her father was black, her mother was white. She came over, and while my mother was gone, there was a knock at the door and yelling. My first experience with hatred and racism. I was scared. A 9-year-old boy, I was the man of the house for 10 minutes. At that moment, I opened the door and there were 4 older white ladies asking me where that little, I'm not going to say the N word, that little N girl was and that she needs to leave. And they were filled with hate. And it scared me. I never saw so much hate in my life, only because there was a little black girl that my little sister and I befriended. I was there in Detroit, Michigan in the 60s. I saw the race riots. In 1968, when the great Martin Luther King was murdered. And I'll also say Robert Kennedy was murdered, who was a great advocate for equality for all. Both these men were murdered. Now, the riots in Detroit, I saw it. I saw the hatred. In our large Pentecostal church, where my father was sent out to take a church in Waco a few years later as a preacher, I remember the nights at the church where there were curfews. We had to leave the church services early, like on a Wednesday night, and I remember seeing the buildings explode in downtown Detroit as a little 9, 10-year-old boy. I heard the machine gun fire. I heard the screams. I thought I was listening to a documentary of Vietnam War, which was occurring at the same time. It was scary. We rushed to our car. We drove home to our comfortable white suburban white neighborhood. That was in the 60s. Then we moved to Waco in 1969. My dad took a church. I was 11, going on 12 years old. Now, in the 70s, in my middle school and high school years, I'll never forget, I couldn't understand why there was so much hate. I had never been in an environment seeing or going to school with white, black, and brown children all together. When we moved to Waco, Texas in 69 and through the 70s in my school years, I was with black and brown children. I didn't see a problem with it. I couldn't understand why there was so much hate. Now, in 1974, I was a junior in high school, and I noticed there was this black girl, and there was a lot of segregation in our school. There was a lot of fighting going on. I've always been a lover, not a fighter. I couldn't understand why people hated each other. And I remember at the dance, this particular black girl, they were over there on this side of the gymnasium, If you watch Grease, you know what it was like back then in school dances. The whites were here, the blacks were there, and the Mexican Americans and Latinos were over there. I know it's pathetic, but it was like that, and it's not as bad, but it's still there. I liked her and she liked me. We would flirt with each other. Little 16, 17-year-old kids. I took a chance, walked around the perimeter of the gym, and walked up to her and asked her to dance. I had no idea what was about to happen. We liked each other. I took her to the middle of the dance floor. I'm not a very good dancer, never have been. They say Italian guys can't dance. I don't know, whatever. So we started, and immediately all the black guys got up, all the white guys got up, and I'm in the middle with this cute little girl I liked, and they came together. And one of the football players, my friend, he knew the kind of guy I was, Larry. Larry was a big, tall black guy, and he said, David, he said, you're not supposed to do this. Stop. I said, what'd I do? The white guys came up and were angry at me, and it almost started a riot and a fight. Teachers came and broke it up. I went away very hurt and confused. And the girl I liked, the same thing. We couldn't understand why there was so much discrimination and hatred. I didn't like it. Now, let's move on up to 2004. My experience of racism and seeing it in this country. I got divorced from my first wife in 1994. Been single since then. 2004, I'm a semi-pro competitive athlete traveling the racing, duathlon and triathlon circuit, and a top 5 contender, winning trophies. Exciting life. Every other weekend, I'm all over the place traveling, racing. There were women at these races. I'm single. I met a very attractive woman, only 6 years younger than me. This is back in 2004. She was black. I didn't choose her because she was black. I didn't choose somebody else because they're white. I used to date white women, brown women, black. I don't care. She happened to be black. Long story short, we had a 2-year relationship from 2004 to 2006. Now, let me tell you what happened. Many instances I saw as a white man with a black lady in America. I lived in Waco and then Austin. She lived in Dallas. We got together during the races when we traveled together, and we met up halfway, whatever. She came to visit me. I went to visit her. I don't know how many times in restaurants and out in public, I had people do this. Mostly white and even some black people. Shake their head in disagreement. I was threatened walking into a movie theater with her by a young black man. He approached me, and he was big, strong, and young. And I'm a non-violent guy. I was ready to run. Scared me to death. My young, strong son wasn't there to protect me. And he threatened me. He said, if he sees me coming out of the theater holding her hand, he was going to take care of business. Oh, man. And she stepped in and talked to him. That was scary. I had a lot of complaints that people that knew I was dating a black woman, I couldn't understand. In fact, my father, being a product of his environment, Italians dated Italians only, Irish only, blacks only, Protestant only, Catholic only. This primitive way of thinking has always turned my stomach the wrong way and sickened me. Even my own father asked me back in 2004, David, do white women intimidate you? Why are you dating a black woman? And it was very hard for me to comprehend that. And I just shook my head and said, what do you mean? No, they don't intimidate me. I'm with her not because she's black, not because that person's white, because we just like each other, we get along. We're human. So I understand we have a long way to go. So we've had angry looks from people at restaurants and so forth. And one more, and then we'll get to a solution. One more experience. In the small town right outside of Waco, during these 2 years of my relationship with this wonderful lady, she came to visit for a weekend, and my son my youngest child was a senior in high school. I think this was 2005. My daughter was already off to college. So 2005, that's 15 years ago. I think things have gotten a little better. We still got a long way to go. She was there with me. My son was playing football at the local stadium for his high school. He was a starting defensive end or defensive back and second team quarterback. So he was kind of an all-star athlete. And I asked my girlfriend at the time, are you coming? She goes, no, I don't want to go there and cause a ruckus because this is a very white, conservative, and very Christian small town right outside of Waco. It was a suburb. I was thinking, oh, come on, it won't be any problem. She goes, no. Now, when I went there, I was thinking about what she said. And yes, the parents of my son's friends made many remarks of the opposing football team, which happened to be primarily black and Latino. They were from a small town, a rival town near Waco. And I heard some very derogatory statements about them because they were black or brown. Now, if I had brought her to the football game and had all those people see me with her, probably would have been very hard for my children. So we have this systemic racism in this country. So I have seen it. Now, what do we do? What can I do as an older white guy? What can we do to help this situation? Well, number one, you listen to the experts. Who are the experts? The experts are black people. What do we do in this situation? How do we understand? Just like my ex-girlfriend and I had talks about this all the time. I just couldn't understand. Please help me understand. She would tell me what it's like to be black in America. And she was very educated, college degreed, a lot smarter than I was. She was a high-class lady. She told me she had her black friends and her white friends. And she acted differently in different groups because there's still that segregation and misunderstanding on both sides. So we listen to the experts. We ask them what we should do. We ask people like my friend Will Judy in Houston, Mandisa Thomas, Saviku Hutchinson, Anthony Pinn. Google these names. Find out what they're saying about this situation, about racism. Number two, the big important V word. 4-letter word, vote. And all you that are in your 20s and 30s, millennials and younger, even your teenagers, if you turn 18, please register to vote. You have to vote people out of office that do not believe in equality for all. Vote for candidates that support equality, that want to end racism. Number three, I am a big advocate of activism. I go out with signs for humanism. There are peaceful and nonviolent demonstrations and marches and activism now, but nonviolent. Get involved, of course. We have examples of this. Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King. Number four, amalgamation of the races. You don't hear a lot about this today. Now, I'm very proud to say my oldest child, Victoria, is 35, going on 36, been married over 10, 11 years with my 3 grandkids. Her husband is Mexican-American. I'm very proud to raise children who don't see color. And they didn't have a problem with my girlfriend back then in 2004 to 2006. They didn't care. So that makes me proud to know that. To me, my take is one of the many ways, or one of the best ways to help end racism, especially for people of color in this country, especially for black people and brown people as well, is the mixture and the amalgamation of the races. When Christine and I visit one of my favorite places, Houston, sometimes I speak at some of the groups there. We were at Whole Foods the night before I was speaking at the big secular group there. And they housed us in a nice motel. We went out to eat that evening because we like Whole Foods, Central Market. We like to eat lots of salads and vegetables. Anyway, went into the Whole Foods in Houston, and what made us so happy, because Houston is, if not, the most culturally diverse city in America now. We went in and I saw a beautiful mixture, amalgamation of all races and ethnicities, all human, and that's what humanism promotes. I was happy. I like that. There were black people there. There were brown people there. There were Asian people there. There were white people there, all mixing together. Now, I know you're thinking this is utopia, David. You're an optimist. Well, I am. But we can get there. But there are things we must do. So amalgamation of races is one way. Now, also, get involved, support groups who advocate against racism, that are anti-racist. And again, as I said earlier, to me, my take is there is no better worldview out there right now that we have that does promote freedom and equality of all people. Why? We have the name, humanism, not just white humanism, not just black human, not just straight human, not just gay human, for all humans. That's what I promote. I hope I haven't offended. I hope I haven't said anything and overstepped in any areas. That's a perspective from an old white guy who has seen a lot of it, from the riots in Detroit all the way up to what I've seen in the 60s and 70s in school, all the way up through my relationship with a African-American woman 15 years ago, and even up to the ugly head of racism rising up now. I will end with this. You may disagree, and that's okay. I'm an optimist. Compared to the 50s and 60s, overall data, and look at it all, I think it's slowly getting better. And please don't misinterpret what I just said. It's still there. We have incidents coming up. Yes, it is systemic. And those of us that are not black, it's hard for us to understand, obviously, but we're trying. Those of us in the secular movement and many progressive Christians are out there and believers. Stand with us. I went out last weekend. Some of you may see the post on my Facebook page. The first time back out after Corona started back in March. I went out with my secular humanist signs. I haven't got my signs made up for ending racism or promoting equality for all, social justice, whatever. Of course, humanism encapsulates all of that for all of humanity. Now, I went out there. I had many people approach me, white and black. And I took some pictures with people that are white and black, Christian and atheist, all standing for equality for everybody. I like that kind of world. I've always been wired this way, as you can tell, and as you've heard in my stories. We're getting there, but we've got a lot of work to do. So for you young people, please vote for candidates that promote equality for all races and everybody. Have a wonderful day. And remember to let the light of secular humanism shine. Bye.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.